Nobody on Earth slept the night the stars disappeared. At first, people thought it was some kind of astronomical event. Social feeds exploded with shaky telescope footage showing entire sections of the night sky turning black. News anchors tried to stay calm while scientists argued live on global broadcasts, but everyone could see the fear in their faces. Stars did not simply vanish, yet they were vanishing. One by one. Across human space, observatories tracked the spreading darkness moving outward from the Perseus Rift like ink bleeding through water. Entire trade routes went silent. Deep space relays stopped responding. Civilian transports vanished without distress calls. And every few hours, another transmission arrived. We found them. Always the same words. Always from nowhere. Inside the United Earth Defense Command above Luna, Admiral Elias Ward stood in absolute silence while officers rushed around him. Massive holographic displays filled the command chamber with maps, casualty reports, and emergency alerts from hundreds of colonies. Every report looked worse than the last. Mining stations abandoned. Orbital platforms destroyed. Ships turning against one another after hearing voices over internal comms. No one understood what they were fighting. That terrified humanity more than the deaths. Ward stared at the recovered footage from Kepri Station again. He hated himself for doing it, but he needed to understand. The giant creature rising through nuclear fires still made his blood run cold. Millions of human bodies fused into its flesh. Moving. Screaming. Alive. One of the intelligence officers approached carefully. "Sir, we recovered something from the 9th Fleet archives." Ward looked up slowly. "What kind of something?" The officer hesitated. "A recording that was hidden under military black seals." "Play it." The room darkened immediately. Static flooded the chamber before an image appeared. Captain Mara Vance sat inside a ruined compartment somewhere deep inside a damaged ship. Emergency red lights flashed around her while distant impacts shook the walls. Half her face was covered in blood. But it was her eyes that disturbed everyone watching. She looked broken. "We were wrong," she whispered weakly. "God help us, we were so wrong." The recording crackled. "We thought the black veil was empty space. We thought the signals inside it were natural interference." She laughed bitterly. "They let us think that." Someone off-screen screamed. Gunfire echoed nearby. Mara barely reacted. "They've done this before. Thousands of times. They wait in dark space between civilizations until someone becomes advanced enough to notice them." Ward felt the room grow colder. "Then they come." The recording skipped violently. Behind Mara, a shadow moved across the corridor wall. "Too large. Too many limbs." She continued, speaking faster now. "They don't conquer planets. They consume consciousness itself. Memories. Fear. Identity. Every species they touch becomes part of them." A loud metallic crash echoed nearby. Mara looked behind her in terror. "They know us now," she whispered. "They can think like us. Speak like us. Pretend to be us." The shadow behind her slowly rose taller. Human-shaped. Almost. "But there's something else," she said, breathing harder. "Something they fear." Ward leaned closer instinctively. Mara stared directly into the camera. "They can't understand why humans fight after hope dies." The transmission distorted. The creature behind her tilted its head unnaturally. Mara reached for a weapon. "They break civilizations by showing them fear. Every species collapses eventually." Her voice shook now. "But humans get dangerous when cornered." The lights behind her went out. Darkness swallowed the room except for her terrified face. Then the thing spoke. Using her own voice. "Maria." The recording ended. Nobody in the command center moved. Several officers stared at the floor silently. One technician quietly removed his headset because his hands were shaking too hard. Ward finally broke the silence. "How long before the Senate sees this?" The intelligence officer swallowed hard. "They already have." As if summoned by the words, the emergency channel activated instantly. Senator Evelyn Ross appeared above the central table, her face pale with exhaustion. "Admiral," she said without greeting, Civil unrest has spread across 17 core worlds. We have reports of mass suicides on Europa and Titan. Ward closed his eyes briefly. Fear was spreading faster than the enemy itself. What about evacuation plans? Ross gave a hollow laugh. Evacuate where? Nobody answered. Because there was nowhere left to run. Hours later, Earth itself entered full wartime status for the first time in nearly a century. Orbital defense platforms powered online across the solar system. Civilian ships were drafted into military service. Factories shifted entirely toward weapons production while billions watched the skies in terrified silence. And still the darkness kept spreading. Then came the signal from Neptune Station. At first, operators thought it was another distress call. But this transmission was different. It was music. Soft piano notes drifting through military frequencies. One of the older officers in the command room froze immediately. "I know this song," he whispered. Ward turned toward him. "What?" The officer looked sick. "My wife used to play it." The transmission continued. Piano music. Then a familiar voice. "Daniel, if you hear this, please come home." The officer's face turned white. "She's dead," he whispered. Across the command deck, more crew members slowly began reacting in horror as new voices emerged beneath the music. Children, parents, friends, dead loved ones speaking calmly through the speakers, begging them to come outside, begging them to open doors, begging them to listen. Several officers started crying openly. One woman collapsed to her knees when she heard her son's voice. Ward felt his own pulse hammering violently as a familiar voice suddenly emerged from the static. His brother, dead for 30 years. "Elijah," the voice whispered gently. "It's cold here." Ward ripped the communication receiver from the console and smashed it against the floor. "Shut it off." Technicians scrambled desperately. But the voices continued. Not through speakers anymore. Inside their heads. Some crew members began walking toward the exits like sleepwalkers. Marines physically restrained 2 officers trying to open the outer station airlocks. Then every screen in the chamber turned black. Simultaneously, words slowly appeared across them. "We are coming home." Far beyond Pluto, deep in the darkness between stars, thousands of red lights opened at once. The first ships arrived 3 days later. Humanity had prepared everything it could in that time. Defense fleets formed layered walls around Earth. Mars converted entire cities into underground bunkers. The moons of Jupiter became military staging grounds filled with rail cannons powerful enough to crack continents. None of it felt like enough. Because every report from the frontier carried the same impossible details. The enemy did not behave like an empire. It behaved like hunger. Colonies vanished overnight. Entire populations disappeared without leaving bodies behind. Ships found drifting through space contained crews still alive, standing perfectly still in dark corridors while whispering to themselves in languages no translator could identify. Then the whispers spread. People began hearing things even on worlds untouched by the enemy. Millions reported dreams of black oceans beneath dead stars. Children drew the same symbols on walls across planets they had never visited. Suicide rates climbed daily. The Senate tried censorship. It failed instantly. Fear moved too fast. Admiral Elias Ward stood inside orbital fortress Athena above Earth, staring through reinforced glass at the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Nearly 12,000 warships floated around the planet in defensive formation. Battleships, drone carriers, missile platforms, everything humanity possessed. And still Ward felt certain most of them would die. A Marine entered the chamber quickly. "Sir, long-range detection confirms contact." The room froze. "How many?" The Marine swallowed hard. "Unknown. Sensors can't lock exact numbers." Ward moved toward the tactical display as officers activated battlefield projections. The hologram of the solar system flickered violently from interference. Then the enemy appeared. At first, they looked small. Tiny dark objects emerging near the outer edge of the system. Then the scale adjusted. Gasps spread across the command center. Some enemy vessels were larger than moons. Organic structures twisted around colossal black skeletons while thousands of smaller creatures swarmed around them like insects protecting queens. The darkness around the fleet itself seemed wrong somehow, as if reality bent slightly near them. One officer whispered a prayer. Another quietly vomited into a trash container beside his station. Ward ignored both reactions. All fleets prepare engagement positions, he ordered calmly. Across the solar system, human fleets moved into formation. Mars Defense Group activated first. Hundreds of long-range rail cannons fired together, sending tungsten projectiles screaming across space at impossible speed. Nuclear missile swarms followed seconds later. The darkness vanished beneath fire. Cheers erupted briefly across human communications. Then the enemy fleet emerged untouched. Not damaged. Not slowed. The projectiles had simply disappeared before impact. Like they had never existed. "What the hell?" someone whispered. The enemy answered immediately. A pulse exploded outward from the alien fleet. No light. No sound. Just pressure. Every human system across the outer defense line died instantly. Ships lost power. Weapons shut down. Communications collapsed into static. Then the voices began again. This time everyone heard them. Billions of humans across the solar system froze as whispers flooded directly into their minds. "We know you. We remember you. We have always waited for you." Several civilian stations immediately erupted into panic. Riots spread through evacuation zones. Pilots abandoned ships mid-flight. Thousands killed themselves within the first hour rather than hear the voices any longer. But worse things followed. On Titan Colony, security footage captured civilians suddenly turning violent without warning. Friends attacked one another with bare hands. Entire families butchered themselves while smiling calmly at security cameras. Doctors called it mass psychosis. Military intelligence called it infection. Then came the footage from Europa. Ward watched it in silence alongside his senior officers. A group of refugees stood outside an emergency bunker screaming for entry while creatures chased them through the snow. The bunker commander refused to open the doors. Protocol demanded quarantine. Inside the bunker, terrified civilians listened to the screams outside grow closer. Then one little girl looked up slowly. "Mommy," she whispered. Everyone turned. A woman stood in the back of the bunker smiling softly. But security logs confirmed she had died 3 hours earlier outside the walls. The woman's mouth opened too wide. Darkness poured from inside her throat. The recording ended in screams. Ward shut the screen off. No one spoke afterward. Humanity finally understood the truth. The enemy was already inside the system long before the fleet arrived. The invasion had started in people's minds. Hours later, the first major battle began near Saturn. The Third Defense Fleet intercepted a massive enemy swarm approaching the inner colonies. Over 2,000 human warships opened fire simultaneously, turning space into a storm of plasma and nuclear light. This time, the humans adapted. Experimental gravity weapons ripped apart dozens of alien ships instantly. EMP bursts disrupted smaller organisms attached to the enemy hulls. For the first time, the creatures actually died. Human crews roared with celebration. Then one destroyed alien ship opened. Something emerged from inside. A figure. Humanoid. Burned black. Floating through space without protection. Captain Rena Holt watched through her bridge display as the figure slowly raised its head toward the human fleet. Its face belonged to Admiral Marcus Kane, hero of the Titan Wars. Dead for 14 years. Several human ships immediately hesitated. That moment cost them everything. The figure screamed. Every screen aboard the human fleet shattered simultaneously. Blood burst from crew members' noses and ears. Some collapsed, instantly clutching their heads while others began shooting their own officers in blind panic. Then the enemy swarm hit the fleet at full speed. Organic tendrils pierced battleship hulls like paper. Entire cruisers split apart from the inside as black growth spread through ventilation systems. Human marines fought room by room against creatures wearing stolen human faces. Captain Holt personally watched one of her own soldiers beg for help using his mother's voice moments before his body unfolded into something else. The battle became chaos. Yet humanity refused to break. Even surrounded, damaged ships rammed directly into enemy vessels. Fighter pilots detonated their own reactors at point-blank range. Boarding teams fought inside alien ships despite knowing infection was almost certain. Every minute of resistance bought more evacuation time for Earth. And the enemy noticed. During the battle, one massive alien structure near Saturn finally transmitted a direct message toward humanity. Not whispers. Not mind tricks. Actual communication. Its voice echoed across every military channel in the solar system. You resist beyond acceptable probability. The words sounded cold. Confused. Almost curious. Admiral Ward answered personally from Earth Command. "We're human," he said. "Get used to disappointment." For several seconds, silence filled the channels. Then the creature replied. "That is why the others feared your species." Ward's blood turned cold. "Others?" The response came instantly. "The civilizations before you." Then the transmission ended. At the edge of Saturn's rings, something enormous began moving beneath the darkness. Bigger than any ship humanity had ever imagined. And it was heading toward Earth. The thing approaching Earth was not a ship. Humanity realized that too late. At first, long-range sensors identified it as a massive organic structure moving behind the enemy fleet near Saturn. Military analysts estimated its size at nearly 400 kilometers across. Then the estimates kept rising. 600, 900, over 1,000 kilometers. Finally, the calculations stopped completely when scientists understood the truth. The object was still unfolding, like something waking from hibernation. Across Earth, billions watched live emergency broadcasts showing blurred telescope images of the giant shape moving through the darkness. Entire oceans of black matter shifted slowly across its surface while red lights pulsed beneath layers of armor that looked grown rather than built. Religious leaders called it a god. Military officers called it extinction. Admiral Ward called every remaining fleet back to Earth orbit. No more outer defenses. No more sacrifices. The final battle would happen here. Inside the underground shelters beneath New Geneva City, civilians packed together in silence while emergency sirens echoed constantly through the streets above. Families held one another while giant screens displayed military updates nobody truly understood anymore. The whispers had grown worse. People reported hearing voices even while awake now. Some saw dead relatives standing motionless outside windows before vanishing seconds later. Entire hospitals collapsed into chaos after patients began speaking in perfect unison during the night. One phrase repeated everywhere. "We are already here." Earth Command ordered immediate psychological screenings across all military personnel. Too late. The infection had spread farther than anyone realized. Ward discovered that truth when Commander Hale entered the strategy chamber smiling. Not nervous. Not exhausted. Smiling. That alone felt wrong after weeks of nonstop war. "Hale," Ward said carefully, "report." The commander walked toward the tactical table slowly. "Outer defense fleets are falling back into position." His voice sounded normal. Almost. Ward noticed several officers watching Hale uneasily. Then Hale tilted his head slightly. "Too far." Bones cracked softly in his neck. "You should stop fighting now," he said calmly. The room froze. Marines instantly raised weapons. Hale ignored them. "We have studied your species," he continued. "Continued resistance will only increase suffering." Ward felt cold rage rise inside him. "You infected him." Hale smiled wider. "No. He invited us." Before anyone could react, Hale grabbed a pistol from a nearby officer and shot himself through the mouth. Blood exploded across the command deck. But Hale did not fall. His body twitched violently instead. Bones cracked beneath his skin while black veins spread across his face. His jaw stretched downward unnaturally as darkness poured from the wound. Marines opened fire immediately. Bullets tore the commander apart, but even while collapsing, the creature inside him kept laughing. It used dozens of voices at once. Children. Dead soldiers. You are afraid, the voices whispered together. Then the body finally stopped moving. Nobody in the room spoke afterward. Ward stared at the corpse silently before turning toward his officers. From now on, he said coldly, nobody enters this chamber without full neural verification. Even then, he no longer trusted anyone completely. Hours later, humanity received another transmission. This one came directly from the massive structure approaching Earth. Every screen across the planet activated simultaneously. A figure appeared, human-shaped, wrapped in darkness. Its face changed constantly while speaking, cycling through thousands of human identities every second. Women, children, dead people, living people. Its voice carried impossible weight. We are the Harrow. Cities across Earth fell silent listening to it speak. We crossed the dark between galaxies before your sun formed. We consumed civilizations older than your species can comprehend. Images appeared behind the figure. Worlds burning. Alien cities collapsing. Stars surrounded by black swarms. We are what remains when evolution ends. The figure leaned closer toward the screen. And yet, its expression shifted briefly into confusion. You continue resisting. Inside Earth Command, officers exchanged uneasy looks. The creature sounded genuinely uncertain. Ward stepped before the transmission cameras himself. Because this is our home. The Harrow studied him silently. Countless species claimed the same thing. Yeah, Ward answered. And where are they now? For the first time, the entity paused. Then millions watching the broadcast gasped as the creature's expression changed again. Not anger. Not hatred. Respect. They died screaming. The transmission ended instantly. Minutes later, the battle for Earth began. The Harrow fleet descended through the outer solar defenses like a tidal wave. Thousands of human warships charged forward to intercept them while Earth's orbital cannons unleashed continuous nuclear fire. Space itself vanished beneath explosions. Human pilots flew directly into impossible odds without hesitation. Entire destroyer groups sacrificed themselves to slow enemy advances by seconds at a time. And still the Harrow kept coming. Because they no longer feared human weapons. They feared humanity itself. That realization spread slowly through intercepted enemy communications during the battle. The Harrow did not understand why humans refused surrender even after certain defeat. Every other civilization they consumed eventually collapsed psychologically. Humans became more violent instead. Cornered fleets rammed enemy ships laughing over open comms. Ground soldiers continued fighting after losing limbs. Civilian volunteers launched outdated fighters against monsters older than human civilization itself. Again and again, the Harrow encountered the same impossible human behavior. Defiance. One transmission recovered from a destroyed Harrow vessel contained a single translated sentence repeated multiple times. Why do they keep attacking? Above Earth, Captain Rena Holt commanded the battered remains of the 3rd Defense Fleet during the worst fighting humanity had ever seen. Half her ships were already gone. The rest burned around her. Enemy breach on decks 6 through 11. Port shields collapsing. We lost contact with Marine teams. Holt ignored the chaos. Ahead of her, the massive Harrow structure finally emerged fully from hyperspace near Earth's orbit. And humanity understood the horror completely. It was alive. Not biologically alive. Something worse. Its surface shifted endlessly with trapped faces pressing outward beneath black flesh. Millions of eyes opened and closed randomly across its body while giant skeletal limbs slowly unfolded into space around it. The thing surrounding Earth was made from consumed civilizations. Every species the Harrow had ever devoured still existed inside it somehow. Screaming forever. Then the structure opened. A gigantic circular wound formed at its center, glowing red deep inside. Earth's scientists realized immediately what they were seeing. A weapon, big enough to erase planets. Inside the command deck of the Resolute, Captain Holt whispered softly, "Oh God." Earth had 6 minutes left. 6 minutes until planetary impact. Then 5. Inside Earth Command, Admiral Ward stood before the tactical display watching red casualty markers spread across the solar system. Entire fleets had vanished, protecting Earth's final defense line. Communications from Mars were gone. Luna Station burned silently above the planet after enemy organisms breached its reactor core. Humanity was losing. Everyone knew it, but nobody was surrendering. A young communications officer suddenly turned toward Ward, confused. "Sir, we're receiving a signal from outside the combat zone." "Source?" The officer hesitated. "Unknown." Ward almost laughed from exhaustion. Of course it was unknown. Everything was unknown now. "Play it." Static filled the chamber. Then a voice spoke softly through the speakers. "Admiral Ward." Ward froze instantly. He knew that voice. "Mara." Several officers looked toward him sharply. Captain Mara Vance had been declared dead 23 years ago. The signal crackled again. "Listen carefully. We don't have much time." Ward stepped closer. "Where are you?" "Inside them." Silence crushed the room. Ward felt every eye turn toward him. "Mara," he whispered carefully, "what happened to you?" A long pause followed. Then she answered. "We lost the 9th Fleet near the Black Veil. The Harrow let us discover them intentionally." Her breathing sounded weak. Painful. "They infected the ships before we even understood what they were." Behind her voice, faint screaming echoed somewhere distant. "They consumed my crew one by one. Memories first. Bodies second." Her voice trembled slightly. "But they made a mistake." Ward leaned closer. "They tried to consume humans the same way they consumed everyone else." Something almost like laughter escaped her. "They weren't ready for what they found inside us." Several officers exchanged confused looks. Ward said nothing. Mara continued. "The Harrow share a collective consciousness. Every civilization they consume becomes part of them forever." Her voice hardened. "But human minds don't break cleanly." Suddenly the transmission distorted violently. Other voices growled beneath hers. Angry. Inhuman. Mara forced herself onward. Human emotions spread through them like disease. Rage. Grief. Sacrifice. She laughed weakly again. "They consumed soldiers who died protecting friends. Parents who burned themselves alive to save children. People who chose death instead of surrender." Ward slowly began understanding. The Harrow had never experienced humanity before. And humanity had poisoned them from the inside. "They're fighting themselves now," Mara whispered. "Billions of absorbed minds waking up to the collective." The chamber fell completely silent. One officer stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "You're saying the Harrow are losing control?" "For the first time," Mara answered softly, "they're afraid." Alarms suddenly exploded across Earth Command. A tactical officer shouted, "Sir!" Massive energy spike from the enemy's superstructure. The weapon was almost ready. 3 minutes remaining. Ward clenched his fists. "Mara, how do we stop it?" Static screamed through the transmission. Then came her answer. "You don't stop it from outside." The realization hit Ward instantly. "No. You have to reach the core consciousness," Mara said. "From inside." Every officer in the room turned toward him immediately, because they all knew what that meant. A suicide mission. Straight into the center of the Harrow structure. Ward looked toward the tactical map showing thousands of burning ships dying above Earth. Then he made his decision. "Prepare the Resolute." Captain Holt received the orders 30 seconds later. "You want us to do what?" Ward's face appeared across her bridge display. "The Harrow consciousness is centralized inside that structure. If we reach the core, we might destabilize the entire collective." "Might?" Holt snapped. Ward did not blink. "It's all we have." Outside her ship, the battle for Earth continued collapsing. Human fleets burned across orbit while giant enemy organisms descended toward the atmosphere below. Captain Holt closed her eyes briefly. Then she nodded. "Understood." The Resolute accelerated immediately. Not away from the enemy. Toward it. Every surviving human ship nearby recognized what the battleship was attempting within seconds. And without orders, they followed. Hundreds of damaged vessels turned course together, forming a wall around the Resolute as it charged directly toward the Harrow superstructure. Human pilots opened every remaining weapon at once. Fighters rammed enemy organisms to clear pathways. Destroyers sacrificed themselves blocking incoming fire meant for the flagship. Nobody asked if survival was possible anymore. Only whether Earth might live a few minutes longer. Inside the Harrow structure, Mara Vance opened her eyes for the first time in years. Or what felt like years. Time barely existed inside the collective. Around her stretched an endless black ocean filled with drifting memories stolen from dead civilizations. Alien worlds burned endlessly in the darkness while billions of trapped voices whispered together without rest. And buried beneath them all, humanity screamed louder than anything else. The Harrow had tried consuming human consciousness like every species before. Instead, humanity infected the collective with individuality. With defiance. With madness. The absorbed humans inside the Harrow never stopped fighting. Even after death. Especially after death. Mara walked slowly through the darkness while distant tremors spread across the endless void around her. The collective was destabilizing. Human memories were spreading uncontrollably through it now. Acts of sacrifice replayed endlessly across the shared consciousness. Soldiers dying for strangers. Civilians refusing surrender. Parents protecting children even while burning alive. The Harrow could not process it, because no species they consumed before had chosen resistance over survival so consistently. Then Mara felt it. The Resolute had entered the structure. The final battle had begun. Outside, Captain Holt guided the battleship through gigantic tunnels of living flesh while Marines fought boarding organisms across every deck. The inside of the structure looked impossible. Entire cities existed within it. Alien ruins fused into organic walls. Millions of faces stared from the surfaces around them, whispering in forgotten languages. Some faces were human now. The ship shook violently as enemy creatures slammed against the hull from every direction. We're losing containment on decks 9 through 14. Reactor stability dropping. Enemy organisms inside engineering. Holt ignored the chaos. Ahead of them, deep inside the structure, a red light pulsed like a giant heartbeat. The core. And Earth had less than 1 minute remaining. The Resolute crashed into the core chamber with every alarm screaming. Metal tore apart across the battleship as the front half of the ship slammed through layers of black organic matter surrounding the Harrow consciousness. Entire corridors collapsed instantly. Fire erupted across command decks while gravity failed throughout several sections. Still the ship kept moving. Captain Rena Holt pulled herself upright through sparks and smoke, blood running down one side of her face. Report. A damaged officer coughed beside her station. Reactor critical, multiple hull breaches, we're not leaving this place. Holt looked ahead through the shattered bridge window and saw God. Or something ancient civilizations would have called a god. The core consciousness of the Harrow filled the chamber beyond the ship like a living ocean of darkness. Endless human and alien faces twisted beneath its surface while gigantic red eyes opened slowly within the black mass. Watching them. Studying them. For the first time since the war began, the Harrow looked afraid. A voice thundered directly into every surviving human mind aboard the ship. You have damaged us. Crew members screamed and collapsed across the bridge, clutching their heads. Blood streamed from eyes and ears. Several soldiers shot themselves simply to silence the voice. But humans kept moving. Marines dragged wounded friends toward defensive positions. Engineers manually overloaded damaged systems while burning alive inside reactor chambers. One pilot with both legs crushed beneath debris still laughed while trying to restart dead weapons systems. The Harrow could not understand what it was seeing. You cannot win. Captain Holt grabbed the nearest rifle and forced herself toward the exit hatch. Maybe not, she whispered. Then she smiled through blood. But you're gonna remember us. The surviving crew charged into the core. The battle inside the chamber stopped feeling real almost immediately. Reality itself bent around the Harrow consciousness. Gravity shifted randomly. Memories appeared physically in the air around them. Dead loved ones walked through the darkness whispering softly to human soldiers. Some Marines dropped their weapons crying when they saw their families again. Others fired directly through the illusions without slowing down. Because by now humanity had learned the truth. Fear only worked if humans still believed survival mattered more than resistance. And that lesson was destroying the Harrow from within. Captain Holt led the surviving assault teams toward the center of the chamber while creatures made from stolen human bodies attacked from every direction. Soldiers fought hand-to-hand against monsters wearing familiar faces. One Marine froze when his dead daughter appeared before him. The thing smiled warmly. "Daddy." The Marine closed his eyes briefly, then detonated a grenade against both of them. The explosion cleared the corridor forward. Humanity advanced through fire. Deep inside the collective consciousness, Mara Vance reached the center at the same moment Holt's forces arrived physically from outside. For the first time in 23 years, she saw another human face. Captain Holt stared at her in disbelief. Mara looked older now. Thinner. Almost transparent. Like she barely existed anymore. "You made it," Mara whispered. Holt looked around nervously at the endless darkness moving around them. "Tell me how to kill this thing." Mara smiled sadly. "You already did." The chamber shook violently. Across the black ocean surrounding them, billions of trapped human minds were rising against the Harrow together now. Every absorbed soldier. Every dead civilian. Every human the collective had consumed. The Harrow never understood one critical truth about humanity. Humans did not unite through perfection. Humans united through suffering. The more pain the Harrow inflicted, the stronger humanity became inside the collective. Now the entire consciousness was collapsing under the weight of human defiance spreading through it like wildfire. The Harrow voice screamed across reality itself. "Stop them." Gigantic tendrils erupted toward Holt's team. Human soldiers opened fire instantly. Not because they believed they would survive, but because someone had to hold the line. One by one, Marines died protecting the others advancing toward the core. A wounded engineer manually carried an overloaded reactor cell forward while his own body burned from radiation exposure. When creatures tore him apart, he crawled the remaining distance dragging the reactor behind him with one arm. Still moving. Still fighting. The Harrow watched in horror. "Why do you continue?" Captain Holt looked directly into the giant red eyes surrounding them. "Because Earth is behind us." The engineer smiled weakly. Then triggered the overload. Light swallowed the chamber. Across Earth, every human looked toward the sky as the giant Harrow structure suddenly froze above the planet. The massive weapon aimed at Earth stopped charging. For several seconds, absolute silence covered the solar system. Then the Harrow screamed. Not one voice. Billions. The sound echoed through every human mind as the collective consciousness began tearing itself apart. Giant cracks spread across the black structure in orbit while enemy ships throughout the solar system lost coordination instantly. Some crashed into each other. Others drifted lifelessly into space. The infection had become unstoppable. Humanity itself was destroying the Harrow from within. Inside the collapsing core chamber, Mara Vance looked toward Holt one final time. "You need to go." Holt shook her head immediately. "Not without you." Mara smiled softly. "I've been dead a long time." Around them, the entire structure began collapsing inward as absorbed civilizations broke free from the dying collective. Alien voices filled the darkness now. Not screaming anymore. Free. Holt felt tears mix with blood across her face. Mara stepped backward into the light. Then she was gone. Captain Holt barely escaped aboard a damaged evacuation craft alongside a handful of surviving crew members moments before the Harrow superstructure imploded completely above Earth. The explosion illuminated the entire planet like a second sun. Then darkness returned. Real darkness. Quiet darkness. For the first time in months. The whispers were gone. Weeks later, humanity slowly emerged from underground shelters into a wounded but living world. Entire cities had fallen. Billions were dead across human space. The solar system remained filled with wreckage and drifting graves. But Earth survived. And so did humanity. Recovery crews later discovered something strange among the ruins of destroyed Harrow vessels. Messages. Thousands of them. Written in hundreds of alien languages. Translations revealed they were warnings left behind by civilizations the Harrow had consumed long ago. Warnings meant for whoever came next. But among all those messages, one human transmission spread farther than any other across the recovering galaxy. A final recording recovered from Captain Holt's ship shortly before the Harrow collapsed. Her face was bloodied, exhausted, smiling. "If you're hearing this," she said softly, "humanity is still here." The recording paused briefly. Then she laughed weakly. "And honestly, that's your problem now." Years later, long after the graves were built and the ruins of war became monuments, humanity finally returned to the Black Veil. Not with fear. With fleets. Thousands of ships crossed the dead region where the Harrow had waited for countless ages between galaxies. Scientists, soldiers, and survivors traveled together into the darkness that once terrified entire civilizations. This time, the darkness was silent. No whispers. No voices. Only wreckage. The deeper humanity traveled, the more impossible discoveries they found. Dead megastructures drifted through space larger than planets. Broken alien civilizations floated frozen in time inside shattered stations billions of years old. The Harrow had been feeding for longer than human history itself. And yet in the end, it was humanity that broke them. Inside the ruins of the largest Harrow structure ever discovered, explorers found one final archive hidden beneath layers of black organic matter. A warning. Not for humans. For anything that might come after. The translation took weeks. When it was finally completed, every government in human space received the same message simultaneously. We consumed thousands of species. We erased empires. We silenced stars. But this species taught death how to fight. But humanity never released the full message publicly. They did not need to. By then, the galaxy already knew. Because survivors from liberated worlds had begun emerging from hiding across deep space. Species once believed extinct slowly contacted Earth one by one. And every single civilization asked humanity the same question. How did you defeat them? Humanity never gave the same answer twice. Some said courage. Some said sacrifice. Some said rage. But an old memorial recording from Admiral Elias Ward eventually became the answer most remembered. The final speech he gave before his death. They thought fear was the strongest force in existence, Ward said quietly before the cameras. That's why they lost. Behind him stood the names of billions who died defending Earth. Ward looked toward the stars for a long moment. Because fear only matters when people stop protecting each other. The recording ended there. But the galaxy remembered. And far beyond human space, in places where ancient horrors still slept between dead stars, something else remembered too. Unknown civilizations intercepted fragments of old Harrow emergency transmissions drifting through deep space for centuries afterward. Broken signals. Corrupted warnings. Desperate final messages sent by a species that once believed itself eternal. Most translations ended with the same line repeating over and over. Do not touch Earth. Do not let them into the dark. The last surviving Harrow consciousness was eventually discovered thousands of years later, trapped alone inside a dying fragment of living metal drifting beyond the edge of mapped space. When human explorers approached it, the ancient entity woke briefly from hibernation. And for the first time in its existence, it begged, "Please." Its voice trembled with something no one thought possible. "Please leave us alone." The human captain stared at the broken creature silently for several seconds. Then he transmitted humanity's response across the stars. "You should have stayed away from our home first." The transmission became famous across the galaxy. Not because it sounded heroic, but because it was true. Humanity never claimed to be the strongest species, or the smartest, or the oldest. Humanity survived because when the darkness finally came for them, humans looked back into it and refused to kneel. And somewhere deep in the silent void between galaxies, Ancient monsters learned the one lesson the Harrow discovered too late. The universe should have been afraid of humanity all along.